NWA Power. So Sean Mooney has been hired as an interviewer, which I love. Loved Sean Mooney back in the day on the event centers and doing all the backstage interviews. So he is now an interviewer in the NWA, and he made his NWA Power debut this week interviewing the world's heavyweight champion, Nick Aldis. This was the Nick Aldis show this week. His promo here and his work at the end of the show and that sit down with Marty Scurll was tremendous stuff. I cannot say enough good things about the work he's doing right now, verbally, to make that NWA title feel like the most important title in all of wrestling. He mentioned his win over Flip Gordon at Hard Times. He said Flip is a flop. He called him Flop Gordon. He said Marty Scurll wants nothing to do with him. Sean Mooney pointed out that you had Scurll removed from the building at the pay-per-view, and Aldis said fake news, and he said the NWA may as well call him the Marathon Man because he runs the show. I thought this was great stuff. Show closed with a pre-taped sit-down interview, Nick Aldis and Marty Scurll. Aldis kept Scurll waiting for 20 minutes. He was about to leave. Finally, the champion showed up, fashionably late. Sorry I'm late, he said. Aldis talked about how the two of them, they've been friends since they were teenagers. You know, I've always been here for you, and I always answered the phone for you, Marty, no matter what time. I would offer any advice that you needed, any help, any encouragement. So then Marty challenged him last year at the Crockett Cup for the World Championship, and I didn't take it personally because I thought that you deserved it. Aldis won that match, and when the match was over, they shook hands. Multiple times, Aldis made mention of Scurll's big money deal, alluding to the big contract he just signed with Ring of Honor, the biggest deal supposedly in Ring of Honor's history. Scurll said, it's not about my deal. It's not about the money. For the longest time now, I've had fans telling me, you should have been the world champion. You should have won the world title last year at Madison Square Garden, that being the ROH New Japan Supercard at MSG, with that very dubious finish where Matt Taven won the championship and not Marty Scurll. Matt Taven, mind you, who later on we came to find out had an expiring deal many months later. Around the same time, actually, his deal was coming due earlier than Marty's deal was. They had Marty Scurll under contract for a few months longer than they had Matt Taven. So this whole notion of, well, they couldn't put the title on Marty because Marty was almost assuredly going to go to AEW. And as it turned out, that was a bullshit excuse. And I still don't understand why they didn't put the title on him. So he incorporated that into this promo. Oh, I have fans telling me I should have been the champion, and I have fans telling me I should have beaten you for the 10 pounds of gold at the Crockett Cup last year. He says, it's not about the money. It's about the fact that I have never been a world champion before. Meanwhile, Aldis, you've been a world champion all over the world. You were a world champion in TNA. Now you're a world champion in the NWA. He says, I know I can beat Nick Aldis. I know I can beat you. He wants the match so badly, he says, he's willing to do it for free. Aldis can even take his purse money for the match. He just wants one more chance. So Aldis thought about it, and he agreed. But he said, under my terms, I'll give you a rematch 1 year after our first match, which would be the next Crockett Cup show coming up in April. But if Marty does not win, if he does not win the championship, then Scurll has to write a check to refund all of the fans in attendance for the money they paid for their ticket. A money-back guarantee match. So Marty was caught off guard by this. Aldis said, think about it. He walked off. Brilliant. If I was the champion and I really didn't want to wrestle the other guy, the surest way to get him to turn down the match, which of course he won't, but the surest way to try to get him to say no would be to force him to have to pay back the gate for the show. I think that's brilliant. Anyway, they mentioned that there's different cities that are bidding, for the right to host the Crockett Cup in April this year, even though Billy Corgan has already announced that it's going to be held in Atlanta. So, spoiler, the Crockett Cup will be happening in Atlanta this year. I thought this was a fantastic segment. The back and forth between them, it was believable. It sounded like a real exchange between two friends, between two people, two human beings, right? They're not just reading off of something or memorizing lines or anything. Marty has established that he is desperate to be a world champion. It's the one thing that he has never done. If I were in the crowd that night, though, I'm rooting to get my money back. If I'm in Atlanta that night for the Crockett Cup, I'm sorry, Marty, but I want my money back. I want a great match, and at the end of that match, I don't care if he wins. I get my money back. So it'd be very funny if Marty ends up getting booed and Aldis gets cheered for that stipulation. I suppose that's the one risk that you run when you announce a stipulation like that.